My first guest tonight is a two-time Grammy-winning artist and one of the biggest stars in hip-hop music. Please welcome P. Diddy. Nobody, you're legendary for the parties that you throw. Mm-hmm. You throw a great party. What's the ingredient? What do you do to make just an amazing killer party?
This is what you need to do. Women, beautiful women, of course. Beautiful men for the ladies, of course. You need alcohols.
Right.
Alcohols.
Right. Not just one alcohol.
Alcohols.
Right. Just different blend.
You need a lot of heat. A lot
heat.
Of heat. Yeah.
Heat. You mean that physically the place has to be hot?
You don't have no air conditioning.
No air conditioning. Why is that?
Heat affects the alcohol, and it also affects, like, everybody gets a little bit more comfortable and loose. Builds up a nice sweat.
That just sounds disgusting.
It's a little kinky, but
yeah.
Rock with me, but just check it out. You need locks on the doors. Gotta keep them in.
Okay, this is sounding kind of dangerous now.
On the 17th of September 2024, federal agents closed in on one of the most depraved and notorious suspects of the 21st century. After a lengthy investigation and almost a year of constant negative headlines, the billionaire rap mogul saw his last glimpse of freedom fade out at the Park Hyatt Hotel on West 57th Street, New York City. The following day, prosecutors moved to indict Sean Diddy Combs on charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution, to which he responded with an emphatic not guilty plea. The judge denied him bail, and Mr. Combs was ushered away to the Metropolitan Detention Center, where he would share a cell with another disgraced billionaire, FTX's very own Sam Bankman-Fried. His lawyer, Mr. Mark Agnifilo, rallied at such an injustice, proclaiming Mr. Combs is a fighter. He's going to fight this to the end. He's innocent, defending his client as a music icon, self-made entrepreneur, loving family man, and a proven philanthropist who has spent the last 30 years building an empire, adoring his children, and working to uplift the black community. Given the breadth of these claims, there's no doubt Mr. Agnifilo will have quite the uphill battle trying to prove that is the case.
We're gonna keep fighting. We're gonna fight till we get him out.
But what led up to this pivotal moment? And what does the evidence tell us about his client? Did our loving family man, Mr. Combs, not orchestrate the seemingly endless litany of wicked crimes he was charged with? Or did he?
Sean Combs, also known as Puffy, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, and Love.
The music mogul has been behind bars since September.
Diddy's out there trying to influence witnesses. It really puts his lawyers in a bad position.
But first, I want to tell you a little bit about pie. No, not the delicious baked dish commonly enjoyed around Thanksgiving, the ad blocker. Idiot. See, Pi is on a mission to rebuild the internet with people in control, which starts by rebuilding the economic engine that powers the internet, which is an unnecessarily complex way of saying that Pi isn't just a free ad blocker that allows you to browse the internet on your own terms. It also allows you to watch ads disappear in real time thanks to visual mode. Not to mention you can even get paid for viewing certain ads. Yeah, I'm not making that up. It says it in the brief. If I said that and it wasn't in the brief, I'd get sued. You can get paid for sitting on your ass and doing nothing, which is one of my favorite things to do. To make your shopping experience better, Pi can also give you cash back and apply coupons at lightning speed at over 10,000 stores, making it the first ever ad blocker to allow all rewards to come through. 50% of the US already uses an ad blocker, so you may as well use one that's actually gonna give you rewards back. It's all free, so you have literally nothing to lose. It gives you more deals and shows you less ads. What more could you want? Peace on earth? Not gonna happen. Just click the link in the description below and visit pi.org/Jobry to begin earning rewards today. Huge thanks again to Pi for sponsoring this video, and now back to what will undoubtedly be a very depressing time. For anyone who felt a little quirky and decided to start with part 2 of this series and is either unable or can't be bothered to click off, in part 1, I documented the many growing lawsuits against the artist popularly known as P. Diddy, the onslaught of extremely serious allegations against him and many of his associates. These include pretty much every undesirable crime you can imagine, with multiple victims claiming they endured years of sustained abuse from Diddy and his inner circle. This whirlwind of allegations all began with the publication of Cassie Ventura's lawsuit at the end of 2023. And although it was settled in the space of a day, the larger story certainly did not end there. At the release of my first video, there were many developments occurring in real time, and it was hard to know exactly when they would stop. Honestly, I don't think they've even stopped now. But with the hip-hop mogul Bad Boy CEO currently sitting in prison awaiting trial, I think it would be a good time to fill you guys in with some updates, because oh my god, there hasn't exactly been a shortage of them. I'm afraid if the man faces any more charges, he might just have to run for president. But before anything else has the chance to come to light, let's go ahead and jump into everything we know as of today. We're going to be discussing a lot of claims today, but first, I want to get to some of the lesser known cases. In August of this year, Combs was sued by Alfredo P. Gonzalez, a member of the Sinaloa cartel, with claims that he had interfered with their drug trafficking trade. Gonzalez asserts that on May 5th, 2021, a business partner of Combs contacted him with the request that they set Diddy and his associates up with some deals, if you know what I'm saying. Gonzalez hastily agreed before finding out that such drugs would be provided to potentially underage individuals, at which point he withdrew his consent. The business partner then attempted to broker this deal again, at which point Gonzalez became increasingly agitated by the calls and said he wanted nothing to do with their quote sex offender shit. In response, the business partner threatened to ruin Gonzalez's business, which is allegedly exactly what he did. Gonzalez claims that Combs and his crew ran a subsequent smear campaign that cost him practically all of his business contacts in the local area. Gonzalez was looking for $666,000 worth of damages, which I guess is meant to be symbolic of Diddy's demonic nature. When dealing with a character like Diddy, who can become aggressive and violent when people refuse to surrender to his request, if you watch my first video, you'll see he's threatened to ruin many lives in the past, there must be some attention given to these claims. But in this case, they were swiftly dismissed. Writing in an order for dismissal, a judge explained that the drug cartel is not a legally protected interest and therefore cannot be escalated as a case. The judge also stated that the claims are frivolous and not really backed up with any circumstantial evidence, let alone physical evidence. It's important to note that none of this necessarily means Gonzalez is lying, but it does make it harder to prove, particularly when your point of contention is that you lost contacts in an already illegal business. This also isn't Gonzalez's first rodeo. In 2023, he sued Joe Biden and a variety of other federal organizations and individuals for torture and conspiracy to murder, running a mission known as Operation Kill King Lucifer. Again, knowing what we know about the United States government, this certainly isn't out of the question, but this case was again thrown out of the courts for lack of evidence and denied on appeal. Unfortunately, as a cartel member, it seems that Gonzalez may have a lack of legal standing, yet his was not the only court case to come from inside a penitentiary.
Cardello Smith, sir?
Yes, I am, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. This is in the matter of Derrick Lee Cardello Smith, MDOC number 267009 versus Sean Combs, Sean Puff Daddy Combs, also known as Sean P. Diddy, also known as Diddy, Bad Boy Records label owner, founder, also known as Puff P. Daddy, Bad Boy, Diddy Run the City, Sean Combs, also known as Sean Puffy Combs.
At the beginning of August, serial litigant and repeat offender Derrick Lee Cardello Smith filed for a temporary restraining order to prevent Combs from selling assets that could potentially be used to compensate Cardello Smith for possible damages, per the Detroit Metro Times. In his court appearance, Cardello Smith alluded to allegations that Diddy had sexually assaulted him and attempted to pay him him off with hush money. More details were confirmed the following day on the Law and Crime Network, which shared court documents alleging that while working as a bartender, Cardello Smith had been lured to a Diddy party where he was roofied and subsequently penetrated by Combs.
It's a very serious matter. It involves a lot of money. And him selling this would help him avoid his liability for these actions done upon me. And I was just hoping that I'd be able to get the restraining order to prevent that. There won't be any harm to him, any of the parties. There won't be any harm to him in any way. And if it's deemed that it's not justified, then he can go ahead and go through with the sale.
Cardello Smith also alleges that Combs bribed officers to keep the incident under wraps, and even appeared at the prison to try and pay him off to the tune of $2.3 million, backing this up with visitation records that reportedly proved Diddy had in fact visited the inmate. When Diddy put his California house up for sale, Cardello Smith argued it would interfere with court proceedings, and therefore the order should be placed to prevent the mogul from selling said property. At first, this all may seem a little far-fetched given the circumstances surrounding the case, but after hearing this information, the judge did in fact grant Cardello Smith's request, slapping Diddy with a 90-day injunction, which even seemed to catch Cardello Smith by surprise.
Okay, so the order was granted?
The order, your ex parte motion was granted, or your motion for a temporary restraining order was granted. I've signed it.
But Derrick Lee Cardello Smith wasn't finished, as the man then went on to request a default judgment of $100 million in his favor, something that the judge advised him on moving forward with. This is a case I find particularly interesting, as although Cardello Smith has an extensive rap sheet and record for filing frivolous lawsuits, the arguments he presents here are not unsound. And if there were no grounding to this case, why would Diddy visit the prison? With the lack of response from Combs, he was requested to produce an answer to the court by September 9th, something that he of course didn't do. With this absence taken into account, Cardello Smith was actually awarded the sum of $100 million. Yes, you heard that right. Although Combs had not responded to the courts up until that point, his lawyer eventually responded, clarifying that Combs had never heard of Cardello Smith, nor been served with any court documents, describing the plaintiff as a convicted felon and sexual predator turned courtroom fraudster, with Diddy's lawyers moving swiftly to overturn this judgment, using the fact that the statute of limitations had expired to have the case thrown out, and maintaining that Combs was not aware of the case until the judgment had already been made. Cardello Smith responded by accusing Combs' lawyers of lying, and the Michigan Department of Corrections of interfering with the case, which was at least given some credence from the corrections spokesperson. However, the money was set aside, and the case moved to the Michigan Eastern District Court, where the dizzying back and forth has continued to this day, with Combs' lawyers pushing for a dismissal and Cardello Smith pushing for a remand, a jury trial, and compensation of now $405 million. Whether or not Diddy truly knows this person is something that will be determined in court. This one is less clear-cut than Alfredo Gonzalez's lawsuit, and Cardello Smith has produced evidence and affidavits that seem to confirm at least some circumstances surrounding the details of the case. His status as a convicted sexual felon doesn't really invalidate the possibility of him being a victim of sexual abuse himself, and previous dismissed lawsuits have alleged his victimhood at the hands of other institutes. Yet, as well-spoken as he is hell-bent on advocating for quite a radical theory that asserts his innocence in practically all his prior convictions at the hands of a deep-seated conspiracy against him. There is nothing I can really say on this matter without making an entire separate video, as my research began to take me down some deeper rabbit holes than I anticipated, but it was indicative of Diddy's declining power. That even though Cardello Smith didn't appear to be the most credible source on paper, he had successfully secured multiple judgments in his favor and prolonged the court case in spite of the efforts of Combs and his lawyers. No matter what the source was, Diddy's documented behavior meant that this was a possibility, and if this was a possibility, then there were other cases that moved back into the legal purview as well. In the last video, we went over Lil Rod's 73-page lawsuit against P. Diddy and many of his alleged associates. Following some amendments, by March 25th, it had ballooned into 98 pages and demanded a response from all parties involved. Some co-defendants responded quickly, but Combs and co. took their time, waiting until the end of August to publish a response, along with none other than a motion to dismiss. Shocking. However, this response certainly does give us a look into the mind of P. Diddy and his defense, and that's what I want to focus on here. The preliminary statement is something else. Combs' lawyer for the case, Erica Wolf, opens by accusing Jones of dressing his grievances up with countless tall tales, shameless celebrity name drops, and irrelevant images. They then attack Rodney Jones's lawyer, Tyrone Blackburn, implying that his recent referral to the court's grievance committee for manufacturing lawsuits in a way that draws media attention could compromise the legitimacy of the case. I won't go out of my way to defend the format of the original lawsuit. Its use of pictures and language is somewhat sensationalist and unprofessional and probably shouldn't have been presented as it was, but that also doesn't invalidate the claims being made. And I'd say that anyone who decides to settle a lawsuit with incriminating claims against them is still not acting in their best interest, even if they are innocent, regardless of how much media attention it draws. But there is plenty more to this preliminary statement. Not shying away from colorful language herself, Wolf immediately draws attention to a post on Twitter, where Rodney Jones is filmed laughing about the lawsuit, despite stating that it caused significant emotional distress. He said he was sad about something, but here he is happy. I'm sorry, but this is some YouTube commentary bullshit. How can Diddy's legal team accuse Jones of playing to the tabloids when they are blatantly playing to the masses here as well? Wolf responds to the claims surrounding racketeering by stating that there isn't really enough of a pattern established to prove anything, which I'm not sure if I agree with her on that one, but maybe that's just the power of hindsight. She also uses the word hodgepodge, so you know you're dealing with a real legal heavyweight here. The essence of these refutations seems to harp on the fact that Jones's claims are vague, but just because Jones doesn't reference the exact days these events occurred on doesn't mean they can't be proven. After all, Jones repeatedly states that he has overwhelming evidence for all of this. I'd also say that outside of the lack of dates, these details aren't that vague at all, and mention events in reasonable detail meriting some attention given his already established pattern of behavior. The other angle that Wolf takes is that Jones's claims are so implausible that they shouldn't possibly be given any attention, such as the notion that Mr. Combs was willing to provide millions of dollars in rewards to his record producer if only he would have sex with sex workers, which it may sound ridiculous without any other context, but is it really that implausible when we're reminded of who we're dealing with and the power that he likes to wield around others? Calling Diddy a freak is an insult to freaks. I don't think the public needs to be sold on the notion of Diddy being an absolute maniac. You saw the intro of this video. The man likes to party, as he puts it. Another great comment from Wolf is that Jones's only real specific allegation against her client was the quote arguable threat of violence, that Diddy would eat Jones's face. Outside of the fact that in the original document this statement is accompanied by the accusation that Diddy threatened to kill Jones's mother if he didn't get what he wanted, what part of eating someone's face is arguably a threat? Was P. Diddy just really hungry? I understand it's hard to defend the indefensible, but there are some parts of this that really should have just stayed in the drafts, such as her claim that Lil Rod's trafficking allegation doesn't stand up because it's too, quote, outlandish to even be considered. Even if we ignore everything else and say this was far-fetched, the document references court case Gallup v. Cheney, where the plaintiff alleged that the 9/11 attack on the Pentagon didn't happen. How these cases are remotely comparable is beyond my understanding. This is the best legal representation you could get with a net worth in the billions, Diddy? Look at my lawyer, dog. I'm going to fucking jail. The rebuttal to Jones's 9th claim of punitive damages due to emotional distress states that this cannot be valid because it does not outline, quote, which alleged sexual assault it is based on. I'm sorry? What? Does Lil Rod have to choose? There's so many! Yet Wolf continues to fight the allegation that she is a serious lawyer by claiming that the sexual assault claims are also invalid because Jones fails to, quote, allege essential facts such as the where, when, and how of the purported misconduct. The how, I assume, being the, quote, unsolicited and unauthorized unauthorized groping and touching of his anus by Mr. Combs. Do you really need further details of how that happens? The original lawsuit states the locations of these incidents were LA, New York, Florida, St. Bartholomew, and the United States Virgin Islands. But I suppose you're expecting the zip codes too? As for the when, I suppose you could give more details, but I think Jones's point was that it happened so regularly that it would be excessive to list out each and every instance. I think the point is that you can assume this occurred during the time that Jones worked with Combs, which is listed earlier in the court document. I feel like if we go any further here, we'll just be going backwards, but this does outline Diddy's method of really just attempting to attack the character of his victims, picking apart unnecessary details of the allegations, and playing into the greater narrative that none of these people are actually recalling real experiences, they're just simulating ideas based on a narrative. And maybe there are some lawsuits that are doing that, but that narrative wouldn't exist in the first place if it wasn't based on anything tangible. And even if we discount these past 3 lawsuits as unreliable or manufactured for nefarious purposes, when you look at the publicly available information, the picture is still the same, and that has legal consequences spanning decades. Tupac Shakur was an American rapper who became a figurehead of 1990s West Coast hip-hop. Revered by many as one of the most influential recording artists of the 20th century, his life was also entangled in numerous controversies and feuds with other recording artists, especially those from the rivaling East Coast hip-hop scene. In September 1996, this ongoing conflict would tragically culminate in his death at the hands of a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas. With such a high-profile murder in a densely populated area, one would otherwise assume this would be easy to solve, and yet it quickly became clear that many were unable and/or unwilling to help with the following investigation, with various names being implicated but no one being formally convicted. The main suspect at the time, Orlando Anderson, was murdered before he was charged, and the case went cold for many years. At the time, Diddy was a prominent figure on the East Coast scene, a friend of fellow rapper Biggie, who was also tragically gunned down the following year in what was widely considered a revenge shooting for Tupac. As we touched on in part 1, Combs appeared on a posthumous track for Biggie while also creating I'll Be Missing You, a tribute to the late rapper. But other than being a grieving peer, was Diddy's involvement in this rivalry more than just that of a bystander?
So do you think Puffy was involved in the shooting?
Only they can answer that question. I have my own opinion, but I wouldn't slander their name like they did mine. I wouldn't say things that I knew, you know what I mean? I believe so. I do believe so. I have proved things that I can say that will back up my claim, but this is not for the world to know about. You know what I mean? It's between me and him, and only he knows. So every time he say it didn't happen, or that's the only thing that makes this become an issue to everybody.
Combs had been implicated in prior shootings by his enemies, but his rhetoric of peace and unity had always successfully thrown the spotlight off of him. Yet even after Tupac's death, there had been a continuing dialogue over whether Diddy put out a hit on the West Coast icon that led to his death, with scarce references such as that in the Eminem song Kill Shot, even if he insists at the end that he's just playing. In 2023 though, there was finally a break in the case. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, Anderson's uncle, was indicted on charges related to Tupac's murder, with the trial date currently set for March 2025. Yet on July the 24th of this year, it was revealed that Diddy had been named 77 times in court documents tying Keefe D to Pac's murder, claiming that the mogul had in fact placed a $1 million bounty on the head of producer Suge Knight, a longtime associate of Tupac's who was injured in the Vegas shooting.
There was the rumor that after Pac got killed, Puffy gave Zip $1 million that was supposed to be handed over, and Zip ended up keeping it.
The Fed said that too.
He said that shit actually happened.
The FBI said it was just Zip.
So the FBI told you the same
thing. He was a
thing.
dirty motherfucker, yeah.
So the FBI told you that Zip kept that money as well.
They said Zip's a dirty motherfucker.
This isn't a huge shock, as Keefe D had long tied Diddy to the shooting in the media. However, the details of a quote, surreptitiously recorded interview in 2008 where he confesses his own involvement would definitely give the claim some validity, to say the least. In the interview, Keefe D tells investigators that Diddy had put the hit out in a hotel room before sending the money to another accomplice, Eric Von Zip Martin. Even more interestingly, Keefe D has since insisted he wasn't trying to incriminate anyone, yet this directly contradicts contradicts that claim. Is it possible he's afraid of what Diddy is capable of? Given all we know about the mogul, I wouldn't blame him if he was. Shortly after the release of this information, it was revealed that Tupac's family retained attorneys to investigate lawsuit prospects, later hiring celebrity lawyer Alex Spiro to look into connections between Combs and the high-profile killing. Only time will tell what that investigation might yield, but if Combs' other cases are anything to go by, there may still be some dark secrets to be revealed yet.
Those girls that was, I think, Danity Kane, he said, I'm going to drug them out. I'm going to get them all on drugs, and I'm going to pimp their ass out to my... And I was like, there's somebody kids, and walked out.
For those of you old enough to remember the 2000s, Danity Kane was an American girl group who had 2 Billboard Top 10 hits in the latter half of the decade while working under producer P. Diddy. After Diddy dramatically fired 2 members on live television, Danity Kane disbanded but reunited a couple times in the 2010s before going on an indefinite hiatus in 2020. There had long been stories circulating as to why this was, with former members speaking in innuendo as to what led to their eventual retirement.
I wasn't willing to do what was expected of me. Not talent-wise, but in other areas.
Finally, on the 10th of September 2024, a lawsuit was filed by musician Donna Richard, a prominent member of Danity Kane who later worked directly with Combs on the project Diddy Dirty Money. Richard alleged that she witnessed much of Diddy's violence firsthand, and when attempting to intervene or provide emotional support to those affected, was met with threats from Diddy that he ends people. Further to this, Richard stated that she was subject to inhumane and abusive working conditions that deprived her of basic rights and needs under his employment. Going into more detail, Richard states that she met Combs on the set of the show Making the Band, a series which featured new vocal groups being formed under Diddy's watchful eye. Combs' aggressive misogyny was made immediately apparent through his disparaging remarks and callous judgments, but his predatory nature only revealed itself when Richard witnessed his first meeting with Cassie Ventura, immediately isolating her and showering her with attention. Diddy's treatment of Richard and her bandmates would only worsen though, as he would keep them rehearsing for up to 2 days uninterrupted, without sleep or food. This caused Richard to lose an excessive amount of weight and experience multiple adverse physical reactions, such as vomiting, dehydration, fatigue, and rashes. In fact, it became so bad that Richard would regularly sleep in a sitting position, fully dressed and with a full face of makeup. Diddy would continuously flaunt his power, holding hour-long meetings in his underwear, requiring her to strip down and using Richard's dire financial situation after the breakup of Danity Kane to exploit her abilities. The sheer horror of Ventura and Combs' abusive relationship only set in after Richard agreed to collaborate with Combs on Dirty Money, witnessing multiple instances of horrific violence and direct threats if they spoke out about it, including an incident that occurred in front of Interscope CEO Jimmy Iovine and other A-list celebrities, days before a record deal between Diddy and Interscope was finalized. Further to this, Richard attests to attending multiple Diddy parties against her will, where multiple women of questionable legal age were drugged and sexually assaulted by Diddy and his guests in front of her, leading to one instance where Richard barricaded herself in her bedroom while events were unfolding at Diddy's Florida estate. The lawsuit explicitly described that Diddy would brag about ushering, quote, busloads of young exotic girls to his property, confiscating their phones upon entry, and keeping the doors, quote, locked and guarded by security personnel so that no one, including Richard, could leave the premises without alerting Diddy. The lawsuit also states that police officers would attend these parties as well, reinforcing a, quote, climate of fear and sending a, quote, tacit warning that reporting to authorities would be both unacceptable and futile. Being subject to Diddy's management while working on Dirty Money, Richard's health issues returned, this time to the point of hospitalization, where she was diagnosed with serious joint pains, anemia, and a low white blood cell count. This didn't change Diddy's behavior though, as he remained persistent in his demanding and volatile ways, exhibiting extreme bouts of rage and violence towards anyone and anything, showing continuous verbal and physical contempt to those in his life. There's too much to detail here without it feeling indulgent, but this all seems to escalate to an incident in 2010 when Richard decided to stand up to Combs after he became verbally abusive at a rehearsal for Saturday Night Live. After being told to dial it down a notch, Diddy decides to take a swing at Richard, only for her to be taken aside by Combs's bodyguard and locked away in the company car, which notably had no interior door handles. She was only released after she called her father, who traveled up to demand she be let out of the car. Both Richard and her father ultimately received threats if they were to speak out about this incident. Despite all of her time and effort devoted to Danity Kane and Diddy Dirty Money, Dawn Richard claims she has not been properly compensated for multiple creative contributions to either, and provides credits for which she wishes to be reimbursed. Alongside this, she states the trauma that she has suffered, both mental and physical, meet the threshold for compensatory and punitive damages, something she hopes the court will consider in the form of a jury trial. It's a pretty damning and detailed document that falls squarely in line with most of what we know about Diddy so far, and his response was pretty in line with what we would expect as well, appearing to frame Richard's move as a publicity stunt with the upcoming release of her new album. Diddy's lawyer, Erica Wolf, states that if Richard really witnessed and experienced all of this abuse, then she would never have actively chosen to work with Combs up until 2020. Of course, I'm sure the fact that he was one of the most powerful men in the industry who persistently and verifiably made threats against others about ending their careers and lives has nothing to do with that decision. Diddy won't change the record. Opportunism is all he can respond with to explain the mounting claims against him. But what about the people who haven't made claims? What about the people who can't? Kim Porter was a model and actress who, between the years of 1994 and 2007, had an intermittent relationship with P. Diddy that was often marked by Diddy's escapades with other women. She ultimately broke off this relationship when she discovered that Combs had fathered children with longtime associate Sarah Chapman. In spite of all of this, they were said to be on friendly terms until her sudden death in November of 2018. Diddy even released a tribute song to her on his 2023 album titled Kim Porter, in case there was any ambiguity as to who it was for. Although at the time, it appeared there wasn't much to talk about regarding the relationship they shared. As tides turned against Diddy's reputation, their 13-year affair drew more critical attention from those who claimed to have known the late actress.
Oh, so it is her official book?
Yes.
And no one touched it?
Nobody altered it, nothing.
So it's not the copy that the gentleman said that he was selling before, no?
No.
It's two different copies. That one was edited.
Shortly after the horrific video of Diddy attacking and abusing Cassie Ventura made the rounds online, Sudanese-American author and self-proclaimed mistress of Osama bin Laden, Kola Boof, took to Twitter to level various accusations against him that she claims she'd heard firsthand over numerous phone conversations with the departed. These included the claims that Diddy often pitted Porter against Cassie, playing off colorist tropes, making Porter leave his bed to make way for him and Cassie, even making Kim Porter lick Ventura's tampon. Boof also made further claims that Diddy, quote, beat the shit out of Porter during their relationship, confirms that she was indeed writing a book about her experiences, and asserts that she believes Combs played a role in her death. Although she admits she has no direct evidence, this is a story that she had expounded shortly after Porter's death in 2018, so it doesn't appear to be motivated by anything material, at least. With that said, Boof isn't uncontroversial either, and her past has regularly been scrutinized, including the claims that she was under FBI protection that were disputed by none other than the FBI. Many of these present claims about Diddy also drew scrutiny because people felt they were very unsympathetic to Cassie's victimhood, which, yeah, I can see that. Yet with all these criticisms in mind, it still drew renowned attention to the relationship between Combs and Porter, and not too long after more compelling evidence documenting Diddy's abuse resurfaced. In 2022, one user also claimed that in 2005, Diddy broke Kim Porter's nose on a yacht before flying out a plastic surgeon to fix it, and that there had been a wide cover-up following the incident. It's difficult to find any official articles on this from the time, though it seems the Sun originally published a lost article with various pictures that gossip forum users believed provided substance to the claims. I can't confirm anything here, but it seems in the quotes from the article, Porter does mention a nose injury before saying it was due to a fall. This can cannot be written off, but it is suspicious given that eyewitnesses heard arguing prior to this injury. A few days after Cola Boof had taken to Twitter, an interview with P. Diddy's former head of security, Roger Bonds, was released, in which he talks about a lot of his former employer's conduct, including his violent nature in regard to women, something he says he had witnessed 4 or 5 times while working under the music mogul. This included Kim Porter, who the bodyguard said he witnessed Diddy grab and smack on at least one occasion. 2 weeks later, in an interview with Vlad TV, Bond stated that the yacht incident was all too real.
And then I picked him up when the yacht came back, and I seen Kim's nose taped up. It was whispers all around the office of everything that happened because his assistants were there and they was talking about it. He tried to say that she hit a table, but everybody in the office and everybody that was immediate around him knew exactly what happened.
Bonds' story is given credence by the fact that he is named in Ventura's settled lawsuit, and that this story has been corroborated for nearly 2 decades, but was there the possibility that this could all be confirmed by Porter herself from beyond the grave? Shortly after Cassie filed her lawsuit against Combs, a Twitter user claimed that Kim Porter had been writing a tell-all book on Diddy's debauchery before she died. This wasn't the first time this rumor had been circulated, and many believed this memoir may have corroborated the allegations that we are now all too aware of, and that Diddy may have been involved in her death to prevent the release of such information. This story remained quiet mostly before news began to circulate that information from a personal diary had been retrieved. Radar Online briefly released an article at the end of July which claimed to detail a 40-page manuscript that had been turned over to them by the departed's friends, and though the excerpt seemed to be written compellingly, this was removed likely after it couldn't be verified and lawyers came knocking. Just under 2 months later, a full alleged memoir was released on Amazon, reaching the #1 bestseller spot on the online retailer. However, this was also pulled after various inconsistencies pointed towards it being a fraudulent farce. In fact, parts of it read more like Diddy Shades of Grey than a serious divulgence. Part of the public's response to this memoir was a statement from the children of Porter, who didn't just denounce the novel, but all those who had speculated about the late actress's relationship with Diddy. Posting on Instagram on September the 25th, a joint statement that insists there was no foul play involved in the death of Porter, and that anybody publicly claiming to be a friend is no friend at all, likely in reference to Cola Boof. They request people cease theorizing and let her rest for everyone's peace of mind. I don't think this is an unreasonable statement on principle, and the alleged memoir that was released was extremely disrespectful, particularly in how it portrayed Kim. Nevertheless, this does undermine the eyewitness testimony from credible figures in Porter and Combs' life. It cannot negate the possibility that something awful has happened, and just because she's dead, it does not mean she's undeserving of any advocacy because she cannot advocate for herself. How are any of us to know how exactly she was treated? How are we to know if she was chronicling that or not? People don't share everything with their family, and when we have substantial evidence that someone is a sex trafficking, violent, manipulative, and abusive individual, we need to have the uncomfortable conversation that there may be those who were more seriously affected to the point that they cannot speak out anymore. I should note that Combs and Porter's children have been vocal in defending their disgraced father, with one of them even calling the allegations conspiracy theories and false narratives. Even if we can't say whether Diddy played the immediate role in Kim Porter's tragic passing, even if we don't take certain testimony at face value, we can say that he likely played a detrimental role in her life, and that there may be things we never know because of it. How Diddy treated her in the relationship was still deplorable, and while his playboy persona may have excused it in the media, on reflection, he was not just continuously cheating on her, but fathering children with other women, something that Porter did say before her death.
When someone cheats and they have a child with someone else, that's my boundary. For me, that's where I draw the line.
In Don Richard's lawsuit, Richard talks about witnessing Porter leaving Diddy's recording studio with visible injuries. In July, female music executive and former Vibe magazine editor Daniel Smith recalled a situation where Combs confiscated Porter's bank cards and yelled at her in public because she wasn't home with the kids. Important to add is this is part of an article that was inspired by a situation in which Diddy told Smith that he would see her, quote, dead in the trunk of a car after an argument, which not only underlines the fact that Diddy had next to no respect for Porter, but that he had no respect for any other woman at that. Unfortunately, for Porter's loved ones, there is no longer speculation. It is reality. And for someone who was close to Diddy on and off for 13 years, that was likely something she experienced firsthand. It doesn't make her legacy any less respected, it just makes it more relevant. Her story needs to be told to understand that tragically, with Diddy's behavior, there were no real exceptions. Innocent or guilty, we don't need a legal case to see how Diddy ruined people, but it helps.
My name is Damian Williams, and I'm the U.S. Attorney here in the Southern District of New York. Today I'm announcing the unsealing of a 3-count indictment, charging Sean Combs with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, interstate transportation for prostitution.
Part of the defense case in many of these lawsuits was the notion that if Diddy was being accused of all these criminal acts, then why hasn't he been convicted of them? I would argue that Diddy and his circle's perceived power and continued threats are probably what kept people silent for the longest time, but a judge might be forced to at least consider the counterpoint that Diddy's civil and criminal cases don't tell the same story. Or at least they didn't until the 17th of September, when Damian Williams, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, released a statement that Sean John Combs, also known as P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Puffy, Love, Brother Love, and Sean John had been arrested on charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution. They state here that this is regarding behavior investigated between 2008 to the present day, which means that these charges don't actually account for a lot that is alleged to have happened in the 90s and 2000s. Much of the details listed in this announcement, though, do not differ from the testimony given by many of those who he is thought to have victimized.
This office is determined to investigate and prosecute anyone who engages in sex trafficking, no matter how powerful or wealthy or famous you may be. No one should doubt our commitment on that. A year ago, Sean Combs stood in Times Square and was handed a key to New York City. Today, he's been indicted and will face justice in the Southern District of New York.
The full indictment, which was filed on the 12th of September, goes into more detail as to the charges Combs was facing, stating that by using his employees, resources, and influence, he had created a criminal enterprise that engaged in a variety of criminal activities, such as sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnap, and arson. They also note his persistent abusive behavior towards women and others around him, along with his consistent distribution and supply of drugs to them, using his power as leverage to make sure they were under his control at all times. They also reference a few confirmed incidents, most notably the CCTV footage that shows him violently beating Cassie Ventura at a hotel, and state that Combs attempted to pay off witnesses and staff members in regard to that incident. One of the recurring themes in this indictment is mention of the Combs Enterprise, something that prosecutors identify as the criminal organization operated by Diddy. They theorize that this Combs Enterprise oversaw many of the aforementioned illegal operations and enabled Combs to participate in many of his illegal activities outlined by witnesses and plaintiffs. Freak-offs also became a more formal term here as well, seeming to identify the many depraved functions that Combs was known to orchestrate. This indictment alleges that such freak-offs would often last days and involve Diddy dealing out controlled substances to commercial sex workers, occasionally filming these orgies without their consent and providing sex workers with IV fluids after said events to help them recover. Part of these freak-off supplies were the infamous 1,000 bottles of baby oil that were recovered from his Miami residence, which became headline news immediately. When one of Diddy's attorneys tried to write this off as, he has a big house, he buys in bulk, I think they have Costco's in every place he has a home. Costco themselves clarified to TMZ that they do not sell baby oil in bulk at any of their American stores. Not even Costco wants anything to do with this cretin. Other details of the raid earlier in the year reveal the discovery of firearms, such as AR-15s with defaced serial numbers, a common method used by criminals to prevent weapons from being tied to previous locations and incidents, which I should emphasize is also in line with what we heard in the original Lil Rod lawsuit as well. Many of the victims of these freak-offs are reported to have experienced physical violence, stalking, and threats from Combs, who used his power and incriminating recordings to solicit servitude from his victims. The indictment also alleges that members of Combs' enterprise would prevent victims from leaving Combs' premises or hotels, and in many instances, they were forced to stay in hiding until their wounds had healed, with Combs regularly using his enterprise to track and pursue any victims who fled his abuse. The indictment states he regularly fed false narratives to victims and colleagues to explain any evidence that could be used against him, creating an entirely contained criminal network that allowed Diddy to basically be his own judge, jury, and executioner, which is a terrifying thought to say the very least. With all of this new information, all the many lawsuits we've spoken about today and in the previous video that seem completely plausible, and in spite of the pleas by Diddy's lawyers that this is merely an innocent man who made mistakes, the physical evidence recovered from Diddy's estates and the narrative presented by this indictment make for a formidable case. I mean, I need you to really visualize for a second 1,000 bottles of baby oil. That's more than they even have at the store, I'm pretty sure. Diddy was preparing for a nuclear winter or something. In response to the charges, Diddy pleaded not guilty, with the judge deciding that he would be held without bail. His attorneys protested, stating that they would offer multiple concessions, such as the surrender of his passport and weekly drug tests along with visitor logs, but by now it was clear that what they were dealing with was someone who could potentially be more powerful than any condition they enforced on him as a free man. And since then, up to $50 million bails have been repeatedly denied as the concerns surrounding witness tampering and obstruction of justice are priceless. So Diddy was taken away, assigned a jail cell with SBF, a man with a net worth of over $25 billion at the peak of his career, perhaps a stark reminder that no matter how powerful you are, justice can still find you. The truth of this indictment was that Diddy had an uphill battle to fight, if he really had any case at all, and this battle was only going to become more difficult as more damning cases were brought against him. With the arrest of Diddy, you might begin to wonder if this would affect the number of lawsuits that were being filed against him. And the answer to that is no, not really. In fact, his arrest might actually increase the number of civil cases being raised, as more people probably felt there was more confirmation that this behavior was plausible in his life. And around a week after his arrest, another lawsuit was raised that seemed emblematic of Diddy's dangerous nature. Thalia Graves is a woman whose boyfriend once worked to Bad Boy Entertainment at the end of the 90s and start of the 2000s. Towards the end of September this year, she filed a lawsuit with the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, stating that during her boyfriend's tenure at the company, Diddy and his bodyguard, Joseph Sherman, had violently sexually attacked and raped her. This occurred in a way that is much akin to what we expect from Diddy at this point. Combs contacted Graves under the pretense that he was concerned about her boyfriend's work performance. Graves, who knew Diddy from company events and office visits, was dedicated to helping her partner ascend the ladder and agreed to meet Combs to discuss where these performance issues existed. When she met Combs in an SUV, he handed her a glass of wine, which she proceeded to drink. However, after a while, she began to feel disoriented, and not too long after arriving at the Bad Boy Entertainment studios in New York, she lost consciousness. Thalia then awoke to what were many violent sexual assaults perpetrated by Combs and Sherman that would be excessive to verbally detail here. But Graves emphasized just how powerless she truly was in this scenario. Outside of the drugging, Graves was only 4'11" and weighed 103 pounds at the time, and was utterly defenseless against the repeated attacks from Combs and his associate who went by the name of Big Joe. Despite all the visible trauma that Graves was experiencing, Combs and Sherman continued and repeated various sexual assaults while Graves slipped in and out of consciousness. When she finally woke up to see her attackers gone, she hastily threw on what remained of her clothes and called her friend, who picked her up and took her to the hospital. However, she was too traumatized to even leave the vehicle, afraid of what Combs might do if they were to find out she had reported him for the rape. In the years following, Combs and Sherman continuously made threats towards Graves as to what would happen if she were to report this, and although she disclosed this violation to her then boyfriend, her boyfriend also discouraged her from going public out of fear of what would happen to his career. Ultimately, she ended up remaining silent for many years and lived with serious and persistent mental trauma that has manifested itself in various forms, including attempts at suicide, panic attacks, and PTSD. In 2023, following following the Ventura lawsuit, Graves was contacted by said former boyfriend and informed that Combs and Sherman had recorded and distributed tapes depicting the violent sexual attacks, while also making numerous derogatory and disparaging comments about Graves in an attempt to shame her ex into completely cutting ties with her. Following the event, she was significantly re-traumatized and attempted to reach out to Sherman to destroy the tape. However, he never responded. With Diddy's now increasing and more clearly documented history of violence being reported on, along with his recent arrest for criminal offenses, Graves and her legal representatives believe there is significant grounds for a jury trial, of which the outcome should be significant punitive and compensatory damages, and the destruction of any media created in relation to the attack. Graves and her lawyer, Gloria Allred, held a press conference where they discussed the case.
The trauma of the assault has taken a toll on my mental health. I've had PTSD, depression, and anxiety. I'm emotionally scarred. It has been hard for me to trust others, to form healthy relationships.
Graves' statement is particularly heartbreaking to watch, her voice echoing the decades of shame and pain she's experienced from this abuse and emphasizing just how much trauma many of these court documents can't capture on their own. Only time will tell on the outcome of this litigation, but I think we can all hope that justice is served, not just to those who committed these heinous acts, but for those who were the victims of their sustained violence and threats. However, there is one small twist to this tale that is important to acknowledge. The bodyguard named in the lawsuit, who did not respond to her messages when they were initially sent, responded by countersuing Graves for defamation and attaching these said messages that in his mind show she was acting in bad faith, and that he had nothing to do with the incident whatsoever. Sherman claims to have not even worked for P. Diddy in 2001, stating that his employment with the mogul had ended in 1999. The text attached by Sherman shows Graves promising to leave Sherman out of proceedings if he testifies against Combs, and there are also allegations that she promised her ex-boyfriend money if he supported these allegations, something that the ex allegedly confirms, though again, this is TMZ, so take it all with a grain of salt. I can't emphasize enough that it's important to not just take lawsuits at face value, and that certain details can interfere with their apparent credibility, but I do think there could still be more to this, and that it's probably worth seeing how this one plays out.
I'm not questioning her integrity. I'm questioning her claims against me. I wasn't the head of the security. You got the wrong man. I've never seen you. I've never did anything negative with you. I've never been in the same room with you. Not only wasn't I there, I wasn't even in New York.
There have been many more lawsuits filed in the past few months, many of them by individuals who wish to remain anonymous, detailing their abuse at the hands of Combs and his accomplices, and in this setting, I won't be able to detail all of them. But I do think there has to be a threshold where we ask ourselves if Diddy's defense narrative can ever hold up, if there really are this many people who are just after his money and clout, or if they have actually suffered at the hands of a man who has been long documented to be violent, manipulative, and predatory. I think the answer is pretty clear at this point. These are court cases from people who have probably never met before, but all tell the same story. Diddy is and always has been a dangerous, violent, abusive felon, and there was no way for anyone to dig him out of what he had perpetuated. But it doesn't stop them from trying.
Sean Diddy Combs tonight fighting to dismiss a lawsuit that was filed against him by a former employee.
Following the arrest of Diddy, Lil Rod filed a response contesting Combs' motion to dismiss, referencing many of his career controversies, but also highlighting his recent arrest, stating that, quote, "It goes without saying that after the indictment of Sean Combs, the bombastic bloviations in the defendant's motion to dismiss did not age well." In this response, they offer to elaborate further if the defense requires it, but feels that most of the details are self-explanatory and are elaborated on by recent developments in Diddy's continued legal trouble. They commit to providing further details and information, and even invite Diddy to make his own statement if he wishes to explain the many flight logs that he operated. Honestly, the lawyers seem just as pissed off as I am, sarcastically offering to draw a diagram as to explain how the sexual assault happened. I think they are very aware that Diddy is likely just stalling for time here, but it doesn't make it any less irritating. At this point, with the indictment indictment, it feels like it's going to be harder and harder for Combs and his legal team to fight this case, especially given how much of what the indictment said lines up to Jones's claims. Overall, Diddy's team has been very lethargic to actually write proper responses to the more organized lawsuits, particularly those filed by the women aggrieved by his abusive behavior. And with his recent arrest and a more formal response from Jones, it felt like this was going to be another one that Diddy really couldn't keep out of the courts much longer. However, as his lawyer Mark Agnifilo said, P. Diddy is a fighter, and on October 18th, just over a month after Combs was officially placed into police custody, he was once again pushing for this case to be dismissed, along with the support of his legal team. And, well, the statement opens with the argument that Jones hasn't really attempted to prove that he made a valid claim. Quote, instead, he points to a recent federal criminal indictment of Mr. Combs and other unrelated civil actions against him as proof of Mr. Combs' alleged bad character. I love that proof here is in quotation marks. Like, yeah, guys, the racketeering indictment isn't valid evidence to hear a case about racketeering. It's wild that people can just say this stuff in court and be taken seriously. They literally state that Jones is partaking in ad hominem attacks against Combs, despite the fact that you literally opened your last response by suggesting that Jones's lawyer's recent reprimand for sensationalist filings somehow affects the validity of his case. Give me a break. Most of this response is just repeating what was said previously, such as the fact that somehow Jones is still not detailed enough about sexual assault, claiming that Jones's response constituted more spurious circumstantial claims, while completely ignoring the whole paragraph dedicated to explaining how they felt that these were sufficient details of a sexual assault. The response finishes with the request that the court also deny any request to amend further details, given that Jones already had done so, citing a case which states amendments can be denied when there has been a, quote, repeated failure to cure deficiencies by amendments previously allowed. I don't know what you think repeated means, but it generally means more than once. This is just a bad faith response, but how do you dismiss civil claims of racketeering against a now criminally indicted alleged racketeer? How do you defend those claims from someone who was working under Diddy during the time he is alleged by the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York to have been carrying out these operations? How do you claim that allegations of someone being violent and sexually abusive aren't substantial when you have him on tape beating someone? The truth is that they may not influence the outcome of this specific case, but it does give it enough merit to go to court at least, and I don't think you need to be a lawyer to recognize that. This pathetic response seems to reflect a change in technique from Combs and his lawyers. It feels like they know the arguments they're making are on shaky foundations, but these consistent back and forths attempt to stall and exhaust his accusers out of ensuring he sees his day in court. However, regardless of how he treats these civil actions, the criminal court will not be as easily swayed by his attempts to rig justice, and if these indictments follow through, we may very well be seeing the downfall of Diddy sooner than we think. One of the questions that we'll be asking ourselves long after Diddy's trial, and one of the questions that Diddy's lawyers used to discredit the claims, is if all of this was happening, how did it take so long for it to surface? It's not like we haven't had these sorts of criminal syndicates before, but Diddy felt different. As much as we all have questions surrounding individuals like Epstein and Weinstein, there was a sense that they could do what they did because they weren't in the spotlight. Diddy wasn't like them. He leaned into the Playboy persona just enough to explain all of the parties, the freak-offs, the crazy lifestyle, but stopping short of ever really allowing the details of said lifestyle to have a light shown on them at all, making sure that any sources of that light were quickly extinguished. Existing in this mysterious world of celebrity opulence that seemed to transcend our understanding, there are plenty of people who probably thought they knew Diddy, including those who covered him in the press, but the truth was, he had control over our perceptions of him even when we didn't know it. Diddy didn't appear to hide from the spotlight. He didn't run from the paparazzi. Instead, he embraced the attention. He indulged it. And at certain points, he even did run afoul due to it. In an era where the media reports on what swimsuit Busy McFlo is wearing and whether he's going to end up in a beef with Crumbo Haggis or Glup Shido, it feels like a bit of an oversight to miss all of the legitimate sex trafficking going on. But Diddy was at a point where he no longer had to care about the press. He was the press. press. In a recently unsealed court document earlier this year, it was revealed that Combs was one of the main investors of Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter. With all the criticism that Elon faced and the allegations that it was an idiotic waste of money, which I myself have made perfectly clear on this channel, you really need to ask yourself what special interest a billionaire music executive would have in Elon's new pet project. Why would P. Diddy care so much about a platform which regularly allowed incriminating rumors to circulate? The truth was probably the same reason that articles on his behavior regularly disappeared from view. The same reason that he had been recorded threatening multiple journalists and industry professionals. The same reason his lawyers are currently requesting gag orders against witnesses and officials while he's still posting on Instagram. It gives him more opportunity to control the narrative. Even if P. Diddy has never actually made someone disappear, he convinced people that he could. And given the amount of criminal behavior that seemingly occurred under his supervision that went unchecked for years, it doesn't seem like an implausible threat. For anyone who ever spent time in his company, to those who were taken to his parties, anyone trying to accuse him would have to admit that they were there too, and potentially ruin their career in an attempt to merely dent his. There is no doubt that Diddy will go down as one of the most terrifyingly controlling people in the media, and his ability to silence people, to coerce entire industries to bend the knee to his will, to abuse people with the constant promise of fame, will be studied by those who want to make sure that something like this never ever happens again. The next question that people will be asking now is, how far does this go? It's little debate that P. Diddy has some very, very dark secrets that have yet to be revealed. But for all the industry professionals named in the lawsuits, from fellow musicians to record executives to the corporations that worked with him, Diddy may be the prime operative, but does it really end with him? Probably not, but it does start with him. It's moments like these that will always cause us to question what we know. The fact that someone can operate a criminal enterprise under the nose of publications, of law enforcement, of governments, all of whom fail to intervene in his criminal lifestyle. Yet a single lawsuit from a groomed, violated, and abused artist who lost many of the most important years of her life to a predator and a criminal began a shocking but necessary domino effect, which has finally resulted in a long overdue criminal indictment and multiple civil cases that he cannot simply sweep under the rug, and it seems that people are far from finished with him. At the start of October, a Texas-based lawyer claimed that there were potentially up to over 100 victims of Diddy ready to come forward, with some being as young as 9 years old when the abuse occurred. Another recent lawsuit was filed where an individual claims that Diddy drugged and sexually assaulted him when he was 10 after asking how badly he wanted to be a star, with Diddy telling him something to the effect of, sometimes, quote, "you have to do some stuff you don't want to do," with yet another lawsuit alleging that Combs violated a 17-year-old after they auditioned for his reality show. These were literally filed while I was working on this video, just to give you an idea of how ongoing all of this still is. As more allegations like these continue to float to the surface, it pains me to say that they only become more and more disturbing, and it's hard to know exactly when they might end.
The biggest secret in the entertainment industry that really wasn't a secret at all has finally been revealed to the world. The wall of silence has now been broken, and victims are coming forward. Our team has had at this point more than 3,285 individuals contact us, with people claiming to have been victimized by Sean Combs.
Upon hearing this news that more and more alleged victims were coming forward with their experiences, Diddy's lawyer stated that Mr. Combs emphatically denies these claims, which is to be expected, with Wolf calling the response a, quote, "media circus." They will likely toe the line that this is a huge copycat effect with the intent of taking a piece of the pie from an exceptionally rich man. But even if there are some people out there doing that, you can't ignore all the people who don't remotely fit that narrative. The The people who already have money and clout, the people who aren't suing and are merely sharing their story, the people who have passed on and yet still have their story continuously told by others for no self-serving reason, all goes to show these perspectives have support, and the people who are choosing to take them further aren't just settling for silence, as opposed to in the past, where many may have been inclined to take the deals Diddy had offered them to keep them quiet in a day. Now cases are being dragged on for months, with grueling back and forth that even if Diddy emerges from, he will not do so unscathed. The one difference about him being in the spotlight is that he will never be portrayed the way he once was. This doesn't have a happy ending for him, and it shouldn't. Among all the depressing details, there is hope in the fact that he is behind bars, and that with a conviction, an industry held hostage may finally be able to move forward. At the end of October, John Legend manager Ty Stiklorius recalled in an article how she was caught trapped in a bedroom on Diddy's yacht in 1999. She observes and argues how the tide is turning, that artists do have more power now, and that people like P. Diddy, who have long maintained strangleholds on the industry, are going to become a rarer and rarer breed with the power of viral media. That we do have an opportunity to turn the page on abusive megalomaniac executives like Combs who only see other people as tools for their own gain. The one thing that the P. Diddy case tells us is that in spite of all the cover-ups, threats, bribes, and powerful, intricate networks he operated, he was still caught. And if someone with his degree of wealth and power can be stopped and removed from the industry without the whole scene collapsing, then there is change in the air. It's just a shame, for the sake of everyone who has been a victim of his behavior, that it took this long. Whether the reality of Diddy goes as far as the criminal indictment suggests, whether Derrick Lee Cardello Smith ever met him in Detroit, whether Lil Rod can provide the coordinates of each cataloged incident, whether Kim Porter slipped and broke her nose on a table, whether Don Richard continued to work with Diddy because she just really enjoyed the intelligent company, whether every last one of the hundreds of victims are being completely truthful and transparent in their testimony, the fact that his lawyers can only ever defer to psychoanalyzing these people rather than just explaining why so many specific details couldn't be is telling. They point towards money and clout because it's the only currency that Diddy ever held over people, and that says more about Combs than it does about his accusers. They can't deny that there's little doubt that Sean Diddy Combs has abused many in his life and used his power to cause excessive amounts of harm to people who admired, respected, and loved him. Even if he is innocent of operating a criminal syndicate, it wouldn't make him an innocent man. And just because some of those people he has abused aren't here to speak to that, shouldn't change whether he faces justice for it. That justice is owed, and in May 2025, we will find out exactly how much that justice is worth.